All right. Welcome to another week of Weekly Office Hours Live, which is more fun. Casey, how's it going?
Yeah, things are going well. Things are going well. Excited to jump into, whatever may be top of mind for folks. I know summer is kind of an interesting time for a lot of our users, whether
Yeah.
you're, trying to stock up for summer specific items or just kind of optimize some things. Um, Sometimes a time when you might try out different tools as well. This is when sales kind of
Mhm.
kick back up, but it's not like that big rush like it is in
Right.
Q4. So, yeah, would be interested if anything top of mind for folks. Anyone's kind of going through that trial and error process, whether it's with your own processes, different platforms, or anything like that.
hmm Yeah. Right now, the big trend is a hot AI summer.
Mhm.
Um, that's apparently a thing. It's funny. One of the softwares I'm using, Superhuman, which I highly recommend for email client. They're starting to do a lot of interesting stuff, implementing AI inside the application. And I just got an invite for kind of like a I don't know really what to call it. It's not a webinar. It's not like a presentation, but like they have four key people that are going to come on and talk about being like AI first and native and how they're doing it in different ways.
Sure.
Um, so that's going to be fun. And basically in their email, they're like, yeah, summer's when a lot of people take time off and like there's not a whole lot going on.
Yeah.
That's boring. Let's do some stuff, like
Yeah.
let's have some fun. And funny enough, this week, there's been a lot of kind of new things happening. One of those is AI first browsers, which is very interesting. So if you've ever used Arc by the browser company, that was a big thing for a lot of people for the longest time. I used it for a little while. They basically shut down Arc. They're like, yeah, we're not going to support that anymore. We're going to rebuild this from scratch with what we've learned, and we're going to call it DIA. So DIA. That gets released tomorrow. I've already had access. It's kind of interesting. There's another one that came out. Actually, I think two others that have come out, and their whole thesis is the way we use browsers is fundamentally flawed for the future that we're going towards. But what's so interesting to me is browsers work for how like things are built for current browsers, right?
Right.
So like how does Aura work in an AI first browser? Is it just the same? Is there any added benefits? So it's interesting. There's a lot of experimentation happening right now, which is very exciting. But it's like everybody is trying to reimagine everything you can think of with AI right now. And some stuff you're like, that's definitely great. Other things you're like, I'm not sure how that works. I don't know if I like
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't even fully, I guess, and maybe you can shed some light here for me and
Yeah.
anyone else who may not have a clear understanding. Like, I know there's obviously like AI search engines and those produce, whether
Yeah.
it's different results or different synopses of whatever you're trying to find. In
Yeah.
terms of like an AI browser, like how does that function differently? Because
Yeah.
like, and this is me probably being, a couple years behind in terms of understanding this kind of tech, but like
Yeah.
the way I use a browser is just like me using it manually. Would it be more so like the AI driving the platform itself, or what does that look like?
It's a great question. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around what they're trying to pull off here because the demos
Yeah,
I've seen and what I've experienced is it's like if Perplexity was just built into the browser itself.
got it.
But then you could ask a question on like about the page that you're currently on and stuff like that. So we're not talking agents yet. That's another thing that's becoming really trendy right now. For
Sure.
lack of a better term, is browser agents. So I think two or three of those got launched this week as well. One I'm very excited about, which I have not tested, where you can go in and say, "Hey, I want this data every day at 10:30 a.m." You go search the web, you do it all, and you come back to me. And what's nice about that is it has access to a internal browser, so it's actually doing the search, everything like that. It's looking at screenshots of the web pages it's on. I think that's pretty cool. It's kind of useful. Of like, hey, I want to go play pickleball this week. Here's where I usually go. Can you find available times? And let me know what you find and how expensive it is. And goes, cool, I'll go do that whole search. I'll come back and let you know. Or you could say, hey, do that once a week. Once a week on Sunday. Let's say we play once a week. I want to digest of all the availability for the coming week and the pricing and all that stuff. And then I want to be able to tell you, I think this is coming. I don't think this is here yet. Like, I want you to book the 10:30 on Tuesday because that sounds great. And it's like, cool, I did that. You're done. So what's weird is there's a lot of specific things getting built, like a browser agent,
Mhm.
then there are more. I'm struggling for terms here. There's more concrete things like a browser where they're trying to bake a lot of these things into the browser itself.
Sure.
I don't know who wins here.
Yeah.
It's really confusing. And then, Apple had its WWDC, so its annual developer conference kind of keynote that got kicked off 2 days ago or yesterday. I think it was yesterday. And it's like there's some cool AI stuff they're doing, but nothing earth shattering, nothing like drastically impactful.
Sure.
Like the only one that really stood out to me is if you get put onto hold, you can say, hey, hold this phone call, go do something else, and it'll let you know, like, hey, by the way, somebody picked up. And you're like, oh, cool, let me jump back in now.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty smart. That's great.
Yeah.
Like, save me some time. But it wasn't a reimagining of the phone, especially the phone's operating system, should it be more specific, with where AI is at today.
Yeah.
And so it's a weird time where there's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of big unknowns. At the same time, it's becoming way more mainstream. So like my parents are talking to me about AI. My grandparents are talking to me about AI. So it's like hard to know kind of where we exist with all these things right now.
Sure. Yeah. And that makes sense in terms of like an automation standpoint, like you said, having scheduled, search results or things like that being presented to you. And then like on the flip side, obviously right now we kind of use it in that search engine format, like, hey, what should I be looking at? And AI goes,
Right.
here, look at this. And like the next iteration, it sounds more so that it's going to be towards here's what you're looking at, as opposed to just take a look at it, where it can kind of observe, like you said, whether a specific page and kind of give you a synopsis on that specific page, as opposed to it being tied to like a search query, if you will.
Right.
And that makes sense to kind of not necessarily be an agent, but some sort of summarizer, if you will, or I'm struggling to find the correct words for it. But
well, there's been Chrome extensions where it would, when you clicked it, you could ask it questions about the page you're on, and it would basically just take the entire content of the page, put it into the context, you could ask it questions. It's that same concept, but they're trying to say, well, this is like native to the browser now. You can just do this anywhere. You just @tag your docs or whatever, and like there you go. So it's really hard to say where this goes, but it does feel like the internet itself, the way we interact with the internet, will change drastically.
Definitely.
Raymond has a question here. Will there be a update where the hyperdrive feature is increased from 10 for the basic membership? So that's for early stage. There is no talks right now of increasing that, but that is something we can definitely take a look at. But right now that is going to stay at the 10 credit cap.
Yeah, and I believe it's actually 5 for early stage, 10 for essential, and then 25 for plus, and then up to 100 for pro.
Exactly.
So yeah, right now with that being one of our kind of main differentiating features between other platforms, if you do want more access to additional hyperdrive credits, you'll want to just select the plan that's best for you there.
Yep. It's funny, we are seeing a lot more traffic come from ChatGPT and sites like Perplexity. So you can start to slowly see people's behaviors in terms of like searching for things shift from Google to more so these LLMs, which is a really interesting concept, because I personally don't like ChatGPT for searches that are real time. If it's like, hey, like this is like a historical fact kind of a thing, like it's going to have the information. But a lot of times, like when I'm trying to get something that's, how late is this thing open today? It's gonna be like, I could tell it to go search the web and stuff, but like that, I'd rather just click into Perplexity and have it do that by default. So the behaviors of everything is going to change drastically. And it's just hard to, I'm kind of thinking through how my friends' younger siblings, so a generation or two beneath me, the way they operate a computer is vastly different than the way I do it, because I grew up with cabinets. Right. So I use folder structures. These people never grew up with cabinets, like physical cabinets. So they're like, no, I just search. Why would I need to organize this? I just search for what I want and pull it up. I'm like, whoa, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so how's that going to continue to evolve over time? And like, what does this look like in the future? See, Raymond has a good question here. Casey, I'll let you handle this guy.
Yeah, so using the AI strategy, does it improve week after week when assigned? So the Maven strategy, it is optimized for that balance between sales velocity and profit margin, and it will go through an initial learning curve trying to find what those optimal prices may be for those two factors. It does tend to favor the margin side of things over velocity. For example, if it finds that a competitive seller is frequently pricing below you when you take the buy box, Maven won't continue to price below them. It'll actually start to match them at that buy box price, just to prevent price taking, maximize those margins there. So it will become more intelligent the longer it's assigned. We typically find that anywhere from, 3 days to about a week is long enough for it to become fully intelligent on a listing. It does learn more quickly on some listings compared to others, the main factor being the number of pricing updates on that specific listing. So if, for example, there's a listing with a lot of competitors that are also making a lot of pricing updates, Maven will learn more quickly on that listing compared to one where you may be one of only a handful of sellers. But it will continue to get more intelligent, and especially as more sales data accumulates on a specific listing, it'll take into account that. So if the market shifts, for example, upwards or downwards, it will take that into account and kind of move with the rest of the market, just trying to make sure that you're still in line with what it considers to be the best price for that listing at that given time. One thing to note is it does build, for lack of a better term, like a repricing profile for each individual listing, but that profile does not carry over from one Maven strategy to another Maven strategy. So if you do have multiple Maven strategies, perhaps with different ROIs attached, it will essentially restart or have a different repricing profile for each of those strategies. For that reason, we typically recommend having maybe only one, maximum 2 or 3 Maven strategies, because it will still perform in the same way. That way you don't have to worry about it having to learn or get caught up on its specific pricing profile that's tied to that Maven strategy. So that was a long answer for that question, but it will get more intelligent and kind of stay up to date as that pricing activity changes or fluctuates on a specific listing.
Yeah, essentially it goes through a learning phase for the first little period, and then it's good. See, Christian, is there a plan to add a custom fee field to each listing? We do have a plan for this. The way we've kind of talked about it internally so far has been kind of twofold. So one, a global additional fee with maybe some conditions. So you say, hey, for all my FBA stuff, I usually pay $1 per unit in prep. I want to set that in one place and have that only apply to my FBA listings. We can do that. You might say, well, for my merchant fulfilled, I do it myself, but it's roughly 20 cents. So for my merchant fulfilled stuff, I want my prep fee to just be 20 cents. And we just apply that globally. On the flip side is like the individual SKU specific ones where you might say, yeah, this is FBA, my $1 prep makes sense there. Let's keep doing that. But for this one, I don't know, let's just call it polybags for a second, right? You're like, oh, I want to make sure I'm covering my 10 cents in polybags per unit. Great, add that. And that's only for that one particular SKU. So we are looking at doing those things as well. See, Raymond, do you guys have experience with Amazon selling yourself? So yes, my co-founder James and I used to be Amazon sellers. We started the first wholesale focused Facebook group, and we did live sourcing, or I did live sourcing for every Tuesday for about 2.5 years. Grew that to about 15,000 sellers. Then we launched the first wholesale focused podcast called Wholesale Made Easy, which is still up and still gets listens. It's like an evergreen kind of content that we created. I think there's 54, 55 episodes in total there. So we wanted to really dive deeper onto the foundational things that really mattered and help shift your perspective and stuff like that. And so, yeah, we did that for a number of years. And then Aura kind of took off, which was crazy and awesome. And I'm no longer a seller. I'm full-fledged software guy now.
Yeah,
I miss it sometimes.
I unfortunately don't have direct selling experience. A lot of what I've pulled is from both James and Dylan's experiences, and then also, accumulating different knowledge from, different resources in the space, discussing a lot of things with our customers as well. So my learning is ever ongoing and evolving, but definitely pulling a lot of our best practices from James and Dylan's experiences as sellers themselves.
Yeah, follow up here. What would be your advice to someone trying to scale? It depends on the model, but if we're going to be, agnostic to the model for a second, it really comes down to your turnover rate. So what a lot of sellers do is they come in and they have, some level of capital, but not like a crazy amount where like it really doesn't matter. What they will do is they will buy profitable things, but sit on those things too long and then very quickly be like, I don't have any capital to buy anything, so I'm stuck. Yes, but it's also true that your capital is stuck in the inventory. And so the faster we can move that inventory, even at a lower ROI, the more liquid we are, therefore the more times we can deploy that capital. So what a lot of people don't understand is selling on Amazon or Walmart is one massive compound equation. That's all it really is. It's what's your average ROI and how long do you hold that inventory? That lets you know some very important levers, because if you can lower your ROI, you can in theory increase your turnover rate, and vice versa is also true. So some people might move things too fast. That very well could be the case, but most of the time they move it too slow. So what's interesting is when I talk to sellers and they say they have capital problems and they're struggling to scale, most of the time I find that they're holding inventory for 90 plus days. It's not a capital problem. It's actually a inventory management problem. And if you understand that, it unlocks a ton of growth, because fundamentally it comes down to how much inventory can you purchase, and not just once. How much inventory can you purchase every single month? And is that going up, right? You can reverse engineer the math, right? Let's say you're doing 100 units a month in sales and you want to grow 30% per month. Do the math, see where you would be at the end of the year, and then figure out based on your data what needs to be true. So I looked at things like the ASP, the average sell price. So what I started to realize, because I did wholesale, is if I went up market, so more expensive things, I needed to basically spend less capital, or I didn't have to buy as many units, is what I'm trying to say. The ROI was still great, but the total dollars coming back to me was even higher, which was fantastic. But what a lot of sellers were doing back then is they would buy 3 months worth of inventory because you get massive discounts because of the volume. I intentionally did not do that because I did not want 90 days worth of inventory sitting there collecting dust. I wanted to move every, 2 weeks is kind of tougher, but if you can move inventory in roughly 2 to 3 weeks, I think that's a nice sweet spot for most people. Once I started to do that, I started to finally scale again, because what you don't want to have happen is you have new inventory you can purchase, but you don't have the capital for it. So it's just this tug of war of getting capital back, redeploying it. And as long as you're redeploying your profits, you don't have a capital problem. That's the biggest thing. It's really just volume. It's how many units are you purchasing, and do you have the capital to do so? You can, because it's compound interest machine, you can actually scale your capital relatively fast without taking on outside funding. A lot of sellers don't realize this. They're like, yeah, but I only have 10 grand. Yeah, sure. But if you compounded your 10 grand by, let's say, 20% every 3 weeks, where are you going to be at in 6 months? You're going to have a ton of money. You're not going to have a problem. And if you're pulling out profits to pay yourself on month one, you're making a massive mistake. You want to not pay yourself as long as you can, so that you're building up this massive stockpile of capital that can then churn out profits for you consistently. And then, yeah, you say, okay, I'm gonna pay myself 100 grand a year, but the business is making 300 grand a year, so I've got 200 grand every year compounding back into my growth. That's pretty much it. There's no extra secret sauce. I mean, yeah, building teams and stuff, sure, that's kind of like the baseline there, but that's where I find most sellers struggle. Even if you go add 5 VAs and they're sourcing like crazy, if you don't have your inventory management on point, they can find you all kinds of great stuff, but you can't buy it, so it defeats the purpose. So you want to be thinking about multipliers, right? If I get my inventory management really solid, and now the issue is I have so much capital coming back profitably that I can't spend it fast enough. Now I need to kind of scale up my sourcing efforts. Now it makes sense to go get VAs or extra help, whatever makes sense. So there's definitely a sequence to these things. You don't just go get a VA day one. You also need to know what the heck you're doing to be able to train those people anyways, even if they're pre-trained. I don't fully believe in that. I think you should still understand what you do and be able to teach them your methodology for doing so, especially if it works really, really well. And then it's just working the math.
Yeah, I think a big hurdle for a lot of folks is the perception of what a bad buy is. A lot of people don't want to accept that, hey, this is a bad buy because I'm not going to hit my 15% profit that I was aiming for. But in reality, it's not a bad buy until you start to sell at a negative profit. So that's why it becomes important to slowly become more aggressive and try to increase that velocity until you get to a point where it's, hey, I have to sell for 0% profit, not a loss, but just to recoup your initial investment so you can then reinvest it back into new inventory. So I think that's a little bit of it. As humans, we don't want to ever look at things as a loss. And I don't think it's a loss until you start to really take on, those long storage fees or anything like that. So just for your reference for that, Raymond, I just posted in the chat there a link. If you go to that link, that's actually our recommended best practices for how to become slightly more aggressive as your inventory ages, starting with our AI strategy focused on margin. Secondly, targeting that buy box to try and increase that profit. And then thirdly, going to a liquidation strategy to just recoup that initial investment. That's typically what we recommend. That's going to apply to probably about 80-85% of your listings. There's always outliers and exceptions to that, of course, but I think a lot of what hinders folks from growing is really wanting to try to sell or insisting on selling something at a specific profit margin and not dropping that a little bit to recoup that investment. So those strategies and that layout will kind of help you adhere to those best practices there.
Yep. See, Carlos just joined the call, but could you go into the logic on setting Maven at 0% ROI? Okay, so this is like the most counterintuitive thing ever. We tested this before we released it to users, mainly because there was a lot of concern with some other companies saying that they had AI strategies and they always tanked. And so what we built, we had tested, but I wanted to like really stress test it. So I took an account, put everything on Maven at 0% ROI and let it loose just to see what it would do. Turns out nothing bad. Some prices definitely lowered because that's where the market was at. But on the whole, I think we lowered the margin by like 2 to 4%. Like it was negligible, totally fine. So the logic behind setting Maven at 0% ROI is mainly because the restriction added with a min price on Maven is more negatively impactful than on a rule-based strategy. And I'll explain that. With rule-based, if you're used to setting it at, let's say 30% minimum ROI, that's totally fine, right? Because it's a very simplistic algorithm. With Maven, though, there's a lot of things it's going to do. It's going to run some experimentation. It's going to test. Sometimes it's going to go down to come back up. Like there's so much more happening. And so when you're talking AI, you want to give enough constraints to increase performance, but eventually you add one too many constraints and the performance starts to decrease. So what we learned is if you set Maven at 30%, just like you would for your rule-based strategies, it's going to be fine, but it's going to possibly hinder performance. So what we started to experiment with is what if we cut it in half? And so we took it from 30% to 15%, and then performance kicked back off perfectly. Again, what we're trying to do with Maven is give it as much range as possible to use the behaviors it has access to make the decisions that best fit the situation. But again, is there a massive difference between Maven at 15% minimum ROI and 0%? In reality, no. It's really not. Now, if you just want to make sure that you don't go below 15% ROI, then yes, of course. But again, it's one of those things where just because it's set to 0% doesn't mean that's where it's going. In a lot of cases, it never will because it's not aggressive. It's not designed to be aggressive. So it sounds counterintuitive until you break out the logic and you're like, oh, okay, actually the way it's designed to not be aggressive, there's really not that big of a difference between a 15% ROI min and a 0% ROI min. Am I recommending that you set Maven to 0% ROI? No, I'm not. But I do want you to be aware of how it actually works because it's not the end of the world. So it's actually going to be totally fine. Again, it has the ability to go within that range, right? So it is a technical possibility. Just from what I've seen, real data in the wild, it rarely does that. So I'm not as concerned. What I would recommend, and my general recommendation on Maven with minimums is whatever you're used to setting your rule-based strategy mins 2, like a 30% ROI. If you're switching to Maven, cut that in half starting. It's going to help a ton. And then, yeah, I see people have 3 variations of Maven where they have a 0%, a 15%, and a 25%. I'm like, honestly, just put it all to 0% at that point. Like, just have one Maven and like make it simpler for yourself. Casey, anything I'm missing?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. I think a couple important things to note or emphasize that you mentioned is Aura on any strategy, but Maven as well, is permitted to reprice anywhere within your min and max range.
Yeah.
So because of that, I always recommend that ensuring your minimum price is still an acceptable point for a sale. With that being said, like Dylan mentioned, it's not designed to be aggressive. Maven's more so designed to maximize that margin and protect margins. So because of that, there's really only 2 scenarios where Maven would price down to your mid price. That's going to be if the buy box is suppressed, it's going to start to drop your price to try to reactivate that buy box. If it does not reactivate, it could go down to your min and stay there, especially if that buy box remains suppressed. And then secondly, it's only going to price down to your min if that market, specifically that buy box price, is below your minimum price as well. Those are really the only 2 scenarios I've ever seen Maven price down towards your min. You do have the option to uncheck the suppression setting in the advanced settings of Maven, which would eliminate it dropping if that buy box does become suppressed. But outside of that, with it being margin focused and protecting those margins, it really won't go down. So just providing it with a wider range is going to make it more successful and more impactful. But just to reiterate, it can reprice down to your min in those few scenarios. So just ensure that your min price is still an acceptable point for a sale to come through at.
Yep. Nice. One of the companies that I've been following, Figure, which is an Android robotics company, released a 60-minute unedited video of their robots just sorting packages. And it's like, somebody was like, oh, new category, robotic ASMR. I'm like, yeah, actually, this is kind of relaxing to watch. But the whole, like, it was a simple task in reality, especially for humans. It's like, you just have a conveyor belt of packages coming to you, and then you have to make sure that the label is face down and like flat. Humans, we can do that super fast. But for robots, that's actually been a very difficult challenge, if not impossible, until recently. And so you just watch this thing, it's like, soft packages, and then a box comes, and it's like, oh, cool, flip it. There it goes. And then it, just pushes it down to the next conveyor belt to keep on going. And you're just like, man, this is cool. And another company, I think it's 1X or X1 Neo. It's another robotics company. They're really focused, it seems, more heavily on like in the house. And so they have these homes that they've set up as training centers. And they're just like teaching the robot how to vacuum and like do these things. And it's crazy. Like, so all the demos, it's like all these things that were super futuristic that were like, oh, we're like on the cusp of this. It's like, oh no, actually it's kind of here now, just like still kind of expensive, but like that will change. So we're getting very close to having robots in our homes, and I'm so excited. So excited. I will have to.
It's really funny because I feel like for a while with AI, it was like, we know what the future looks like. We're just not there yet. And now we've kind of arrived at, or about to arrive at that future. And now we just don't know what the actual future looks like at this point. As we were talking about earlier, AI browsers, we know a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the Apple designer guy and the OpenAI guy.
Johnny Ive.
Yeah. We talked about their partnership, and they're supposedly working on some sort of AI hardware. We don't really know what that's going to provide or what that's going to look like. So just getting caught up to all the predictions, it's now hard to predict where we're going to go, but it'll be interesting to see how it kind of unfolds over the next, few months. It seems like these updates are coming quicker and quicker as time goes on.
Exponential, man. So I keep trying to tell people, I was like, you think it's 2 years away? It's like 3 to 6 months. I promise you, maybe. And I'm being conservative even saying that. So we're getting there. See, Amar, I noticed that sometimes Aura shows I have the buy box, but when I check Keepa, it shows a different seller having the buy box. All right. So the way Keepa's getting data is their web scraping is what they're doing. It's not always the most accurate. And we do know that there can be delta, so differences between what's shown on the browser and what is considered as true and factual via the API. So what we do at Aura is we actually pull that information directly from Amazon or from Walmart to know exactly what they're saying is the truth today. You will notice if you use a number of different tools, you will get different data points. Good example here is you might see different fees using like a Chrome extension than you would using Aura, or another tool that's basically not using the browser information. We're using the API information. So there can be deltas there. It can be kind of confusing. Another thing to keep in mind too is your browser, at least on Amazon, is typically cached for about 15 minutes. And by cache, I just mean the data is basically frozen. So you're not always getting the most up-to-date data, because when you cache information, it makes the page faster to load. So it kind of creates the illusion of speed. What really is happening is they're just not giving you accurate data. This is super common, by the way. This is not a bad thing. We do caching for search and stuff like that. It just allows us to speed things up, but that means you have to update the cache at some interval. If you're looking at the browser, I would recommend using incognito. So it's basically removing the cache and doing a fresh page load. So if you're trying to see who's in the buy box right now, either you're going to use an API like Aura is showing, or you're going to use incognito to see what is true at this current moment. Another upside of using incognito is it generally removes the region. So it's not doing this geolocation thing. Amazon and Walmart do have regional buy boxes. However, those are not a concept in the API. There's only one price, so you can't do anything with regional buy boxes from a repricing perspective. So you could be saying, oh, I'm in the buy box. It's like, well, yeah, because you're near that region of your inventory. Or what is more factually correct, you're not actually in the buy box in the global sense. So it really just depends. So that creates some confusion. It's very annoying. And honestly, sometimes like the Amazon API data is incorrect. Very much happens. You know, the fees could be incorrect. We've seen Amazon's FBA calculator not math correctly. That was hilarious because we're like, oh, like we're checking this. And we're like, yeah, their math doesn't math. Like, that's so crazy. These are massive systems. There are bound to be discrepancies between the data pieces. Also, if you're looking at Keep It data, it's the last time that they scraped the data. So if they scraped it an hour ago, that data is now an hour outdated. So just because Keepa says that person's in the buy box, that was only true when they looked at the page. And I don't know the exact frequency of which they scrape updated data. Could be once an hour, it could be once a day. I really don't know. But it's very likely to be that data is going to be less up to date than the API, because we're getting the API updates in real time.
Yeah, and one thing to note as well, we actually do receive, since we're collecting that buy box data directly from Amazon's API, we actually do see when there are regional buy boxes. If you are on a specific product page, you can click on that buy box price, and you'll see a little trophy logo next to an offer that would be the buy box winner. Sometimes there are multiple trophies, which does indicate a regional buy box. Regional buy boxes, like Dylan said, are very difficult to test. Obviously, if you use an incognito window, it'll remove your specific region, but there's no way to test, hey, let me test what the buy box is in this different region here. And when we do receive data that there's multiple buy boxes, we're only able to reprice against the lower priced buy box. That's just a limitation with, how how Amazon's API is built and how we have to work with it. But you do at least have the ability to get some insight into if there might be a regional buy box, and you can kind of adjust accordingly there. But if you are seeing data that you're winning the buy box in Aura, we're gathering that right from Amazon. So you're likely winning that buy box, whether they're working on reflecting that update or you're winning in a different region that you're not currently having access to via your specific location or browser there.
Yep. See, Christian, can you talk about your Walmart repricing and how similar / different it is from Amazon, trying to evaluate if it's time for us to upgrade and include Aura's Walmart repricing? Thank you. Yes. There's a lot of differences between what we can do on Amazon and what we can't do on Walmart. There's a lot less data in Walmart's API. So there's a lot of things we just can't see, which kind of reduces some functionality. What's interesting though, is when we started to design this, we started to work with some very big name Walmart sellers. And I like doing this thing of like, all right, I put an easy button in front of you. You get to click in, I build whatever you want. Tell me exactly what you want. Everybody said, I just want you to match the buy box. Okay. So funny enough, as different as it is, it's actually very simplistic, because the way the buy box rotation works on Walmart is very different than the way it works on Amazon. Amazon, we're going to rotate, and have a share of the pie. Walmart's a wait in line situation. So if I'm in the buy box and Casey matches me, I still have it until I sell out, and then it's going to go to Casey unless he, comes in and undercuts me. And that's a better offer. That's a different story. And so in terms of thinking about when it makes sense to start using Walmart, if you're already an Aura user, for a lot of sellers, this is why I love that we do pricing packages based on the average of the last 2 months of revenue and not SKUs, not the number of listings. Because for some sellers, let's say you're on early stage, that takes you up to 50K a month in sales. And let's say you're doing 35,000 a month on Amazon, but you're doing $5,000 a month on Walmart. Well, great. Go ahead and add Walmart. It's not going to cost you anything more, which is so nice. So we're not charging more simply because it's a different platform, or is kind of agnostic to what the platform is. Instead, it's just going to say, well, based on the marketplaces we have connected here, what's the average of the last 2 months of revenue in total? That's your pricing. So it makes it super simplistic. So most of our users, when we launched Walmart, haven't paid us a dime extra, which is great, because they're like, yeah, I'm not doing a ton on Walmart, but I'd like to be doing more and I could use repricing. Great. There you go. So it really depends on, kind of that equation, because if it doesn't cost you anything more, then I would say now's the perfect time to do it because you have nothing to lose. On the flip side, if it is going to take you into that next tier, you kind of just need to think about it from the sense of what additional cost is this going to be per month, and will this basically add more than that in net profit for me adding Walmart specifically? And you can test that too. Here's what's so cool. Let's say you add it and it does take you to the next tier, and you test it out and you're like, I'm actually a little too soon on the Walmart side. Fine. Remove Walmart, go back to your previous pricing, downgrade. There you go. So you can test this out pretty well. Casey, anything you want to add on to that?
No, I was just going to kind of echo the wait in line format of Walmart's buy box. And that's really the main difference between the two. Like we discussed, you can kind of rotate through the buy box on Amazon. And if you lose it, you can adjust your price pretty quickly, regain it.
Yeah.
That's very different on Walmart. If you do lose that buy box, it's much more difficult to reacquire. And if you are that buy box winner, you're going to hold it until you either raise your price, you sell out, or someone prices below you. Due to that, one of the main differences in best practices between each platform is raising your price when you become the buy box winner. On Amazon, that's a pretty good best practice to try to close the gap between you and the next highest offer, try to maximize some margins, get a little bit more profit into your pocket. But on Walmart, that's definitely not advantageous because it can cause you to lose that buy box and it's much more difficult to take it back. So that's one of the reasons why we currently only have a buy box targeting strategy on Walmart. And in terms of the maintenance section, which is that section of the strategy that tells Aura what to do when you become the buy box winner, right now on Walmart strategies, that's selected to do not reprice. That's just based on best practices. We know that if you win the buy box, it's obviously ideal to maximize margins, but it's not a best practice on Walmart. So right now you would be held at your buy box winning price. And that is what we recommend. As Walmart's API evolves, we gain access to more data that's going to unlock the option for more functionality as well. And if they change their buy box logic, we're obviously going to try to keep up to date and provide you folks with the best features to try to maximize the functionality there. But as it stands today, that best practice is to either just match or price slightly below the buy box, and when you become the winner, to just stay at your current price. So that's really the main difference between those two platforms and what we recommend there. So the good thing is that if you go to build a Walmart strategy, those predetermined settings are actually already set based on our best practices. If you have a different way you'd like to reprice, you could obviously change those settings as much as you'd like, but trying to help steer you folks in the right direction and make sure that you're set up for the best results there.
Nice. And Christian, so there's no calendar on this. We do live office hours every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. EST, so it's pretty consistent. We do send emails out to our users and give you a little pop-up in-app to let you know, hey, we're going live. So we'll let you know the day before, and then I think an hour before, right, Casey?
Yep. Yeah. We send an email at 1:00 Eastern the day before, and then we send a 1 hour reminder and then a hey, we're live reminder as well. So you'll be receiving those emails pretty frequently there, Christian. If we ever do decide to cancel office hours, you will get that email at least 1 day in advance. So that typical, hey, we're having office hours tomorrow email would just say, hey, we're actually not having office hours tomorrow. We'll resume the following week. But you can also go to the same page you went to jump into office hours and look at any previously recorded office hours sessions. So if you do happen to miss it for whatever reason, you can go back, kind of jump in, watch it at whatever pace you'd like. Make sure you don't miss anything that's going to be really pertinent or important for you to get up to speed on there.
Nice. One thing I was talking about earlier that I do want to show, because they did launch a little video here. So this is the one I was talking about. So a little guy following. Just watch some of the movements on this. Just watch how it just seems practical. It's kind of weird. It starts off kind of slow. They're being all, techie and, it's like tech and nature together. Yeah. It's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, it's always funny to see how marketing teams determine to present these functions to people.
Like, that was kind of cool. That was a cool little movement. This one's pretty neat. For a second, I was like, "Oh, that's definitely a person in the suit." But I'm like, "Oh, actually, no, it's not." Like, this one definitely looks a little creepier for some reason than the ones I usually see. I can't tell you why. I think it's just like the gray outfit, like the space outfit kind of vibe. It's like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like the most extreme contrast possible, like having it walk in nature and it be like fully not natural.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's more logical to see it in a prep center in somewhere where it can see, hey, it's functioning in an area with more tech and things like that. But yeah, that's funny how they kind of presented that.
Like, I'm obviously going to put like a cool shirt on my robot. Like, my robot will have an Aura t-shirt, guaranteed. So, but yeah, it's just, it's one of those things where, every few weeks you get a new demo and you're like, oh, cool, they just unlocked that skill. That's nice. Like, when can I get one? So what's cool though about the space is they're thinking about it from a commercial standpoint. So working in warehouses, factories, stuff like that, which makes a ton of sense, but also they're thinking about them in the homes to increase, quality of life, have additional help, things like that. And yeah, it's kind of dumbfounding. Cause there's times where I'm like, I wish I had somebody else here to help me like move this thing. If I could just be like, hey, robot, come here. Slide that over for me real quick, like hand me that tool, or like, hey, where the heck is that thing? Go find it and bring it to me. It's like, yeah, I got you. Or like, hey, like, go do the laundry, man. I don't want to do that right now. It's like, all right, cool. Done.
Yeah, I always think of iRobot. There's a couple scenes in iRobot where there's like he's at his grandma's house or whatever, and there's like a robot doing like the dishes and stuff like that, which is really funny. I saw a video the other day where someone had 3 phones. They were all AI agents, and they were talking to each other.
They changed the language.
Yeah, and then they recognized that they were all AI, and they went into some, like, I think they called it like Gibberlink, some unknown language to humans, and they started communicating in like an indecipherable way. So,
and it's hyper. Yeah, the language they switched to is way more efficient for digital things. I'm not going to say like species quite yet, but for digital things, it's a faster way of communication. And yeah, they basically are like, oh, you're AI too? Hey, do you want to do this? It's like, yeah, it's way faster than using human language. Like, human language is so primitive. And they're like, all right, cool, we're done. It's like, oh my God, dude. Like, this is crazy. So yeah, it's fun stuff. So it's, again, I harp on it because it's here and because it's cool. And I think our lives are going to look it's funny. We talk about movies quite often because you're a big film guy. I have been rewatching like 90s movies because they were just fantastic. I'm talking like Men in Black, like things where they had their theory for what the future kind of would look like, but without it being like a pure futurist kind of film. It's not like this dystopian, utopian kind of thing. There's like, oh, here's like a regular life in the future. And I rewatched those now. I'm like, man, we kind of have some version of those things. So in iRobot, nobody drove cars, right? Like that wasn't really a thing. Well, now we have Teslas with full self-driving, and Robo Taxi or Cyber Taxi, whatever the heck Tesla's calling theirs, is officially going live on the 22nd of this month. That just got announced. They're already seeing them in Austin being driven around as of 2 days ago. So like we have the inklings of these things. And now it's just so fun to go rewatch those movies when I was a kid and just be like, oh, those things that look so cool, like we kind of have access to or will have access to in my timeline. That's pretty incredible. How could you not be excited for the future of our species?
Yeah, and what's really fun around, gonna get a little nerdy on film real quick. I love that era of movies is because it was like the perfect combination of using practical and special effects. That's when special effects, specifically CGI, computer generated imaging, was starting to become really applicable, but it was still very expensive. So they were still using a lot of practical effects to kind of work them together. So due to that, you had a lot of very tangible things. It was really great in like spy movies, in this instance, like sci-fi movies and things where there's like tangible objects that the actors are actually working with. Today, a lot of that is just CGI because it's now cheaper and it's easier to just spin those things up more quickly. But there's something to be said about like that practical effects. And I think in like those sci-fi genres, it made it very easy to kind of look towards the future at that point and kind of create different devices, gadgets, and gizmos. That we definitely have in like our world today. I feel like there were all sorts of things that like represented or were reminiscent of like FaceTime or anything like that. A lot of those movies, and now we have that and more today. So yeah,
and we totally take it for granted. Like, oh yeah, use FaceTime. Like, dude, this is the future. This is cool. Well, it's funny because I'm a big Wes Anderson film guy because I like his shooting style. I like his color palettes. But I like his practical stuff that he does, and it's like you watch some of this and you're like, how in the world did you pull this off? Like I can't fathom this. It'll be like clearly like a miniature, representation of a space, but then like way in the distance, there's like an actual person walking. You're like, how did you pull this off? I do wonder if there's going to be like a more boutique film culture of practicals over CGI, AI, and stuff like that. Just, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it's just for like nerds like us who kind of grew up with that. But like younger generations are like, I literally don't care. Like I've never seen Men in Black, the originals. Like I've seen the new ones. So I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think the big thing there is always access to budget. Smaller budgets make filmmakers be more creative within their budget and specifically using practical effects. If you get a budget of, once you get up to like the 25 million mark, you can kind of be a little bit more lackadaisical with practicals and kind of focus more on the CGI. That's one of the reasons why I love horror movies, because those budgets are always small. They always get greenlit because the ROI is massive for studios, and it just has directors kind of be a little bit more in the weeds and a little bit more hands-on with those practicals. But yeah, that's one of the big waves. And it's interesting when you see, A24 10 years ago was very much a small indie studio. They've since won Oscars. Yeah, they've since won Oscars, so they can give out bigger budgets. And it's interesting to see them work with directors who started with them and are now giving them bigger budgets, and how those directors who came up with smaller budgets and kind of bare bones are now working with those larger budgets. So yeah, I think it's a combination of a few different things, but
that's cool.
As long as smaller movies keep getting greenlit, I think we'll still continue to see some cool practical effects in different areas for sure.
Yeah, nice. No, it totally makes sense. Well, guys, we're going to wrap it up here for time. Again, this is weekly live office hours. So we do this every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. EST. There is no format. That's why it's called office hours. We just jump in here, answer as many questions as we can. We want it to be a high value use of your time for an hour each week. If you have additional questions after the fact, please don't wait. Jump into support, ask us questions. The team is here to help in any way, shape, form we can. But with that, we will let you get back to the rest of your week and enjoy it.
Yeah. Have a good week, folks.